Hey guys, and welcome to Unit 5, where you're going to be looking into cognitive psychology. This is going to be focusing on thinking, intelligence, language, creativity, problem solving, as well as memory. So, we are going to get started. First off, we had a whole big idea of this cognitive revolution, and psychologists, scientists, everyone was just kind of like, wow, think. How do we think? How do we problem solve? How do we remember? Can we remember things better? How can we improve memory? So in the 1950s, psychology kind of focuses on that mind and mental processes, which they kind of came up with, hey, our mind are kind of like computers. This is where computers start to come about. They're ginormous. One computer fills up a whole room. But our brains are very similar. So if you guys look at this next slide, as a human, you have input, your brain, your mind, cognition, all that happens, and then there's an output. Similarly enough, computers, there's input, there's hardware and software, memory and operations, and then there's an output. So what exactly is cognitive psychology? It's an approach that sought to explain observable behavior by investigating mental processes and structures that we cannot directly observe. So, pretty interesting concept. Some of the things that are involved with thinking are actually having some sort of concept, which is just a mental group of similar objects, events, ideas, or people. Problem solving, reasoning and decision making, thinking critically, and thinking creatively, and building upon those things. So our main concepts are, again, ways we group things, and allows us to be very general, allows us to associate different experiences and objects, helps with memory, and it actually improves it. And it provides clues about how to react to another object or experience in the future. A prototype or a prototype model are all instances of the concept that are compared to a prototype or an ideal example. Just matching new items to a prototype as a reference. This could be like looking at feathered creatures, and when you look at a bird, you might be like, oh, hey, that's like a robin. So then we have our evil man, most likely, Levi Hutchins. So what he wanted to do was wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning every single day. And you guys know when you're tired, it can be very difficult to do that. So he was problem solving and he created the alarm clock. So we can kind of conclude he's not the best friend of ours. So he applied problem solving to that situation. And we do have a few different steps in problem solving. So first we are going to look at step 1, which talks about finding out the specific problem and framing it. Then we're going to develop a good problem-solving strategy, evaluate solutions, and then rethink and redefine any of our problems. So within our step 2, we have to look at some of those ways that we answer and problem solve. So we have our sub goals, so kind of our smaller our smaller goals to lead to our bigger goals. So if you're writing a paper, you might work on your thesis, then a couple of your body paragraphs, and then maybe a week later your conclusion. That way you're not procrastinating and all at once just overwhelmed. This can also be like working backwards. You have a dance recital on December 21st. So you're going to start learning dance 1 in September, dance 2 in October, dance 3 in November, and then practice all of those and not just learn everything the week before. An algorithm is a strategy which includes formulas, any sort of instructions, and they help test out possible solutions, but they have to guarantee a solution to the problem. Can they always be possible? Maybe. But an example would be like following a recipe or directions while driving. But they're a rule. They always produce something. Whereas a heuristic is a shortcut. It's a more simple thinking kind of strategy. Allows us to make judgments and solve problems more efficiently. But it might not always guarantee an answer. Some obstacles that we may face are fixations. If you're used to doing something a certain way, it's hard to try something new. Or looking at a more modern perspective. With this whole OK Boomer move, we have a lot of people trying to use technology, and they're like, hey, I used to do X, Y, and Z using my phone, and now this button doesn't work, or there's no home button on their iPhone, and they can't figure it out. Functional fixedness is just being focused on the usual function. So if you guys think of the movie The Little Mermaid, Ariel is brushing her hair with a fork. She does not lack functional fixedness. So she's like, hey, I need to brush my hair. Don't have a brush. I'm going to use a fork. Finding other uses for things, which is just kind of like thinking outside of the box, looking at different approaches, finding creative solutions, and overcoming challenges. And then we have reasoning. We have two different types, inductive and deductive reasoning. Our deductive reasoning is kind of like our duh moment. It's driven by logic, very general to specific, whereas inductive reasoning is driven by data, and it's very specific to general. Then we have some decision making, evaluating alternatives and making choices, and trying to get the best outcome possible. And some days we have to make a lot more decisions than we think we're going to make in one single day. Like, how do you know how to trust certain people? In a sport, how do you know to shoot the basket when you're ready or pass it to someone else? It's a little weird to think about. There's two systems for reasoning and decision making. System 1 is automatic. Rapid, you have your shortcut heuristic ways. You listen to your gut. Whereas System 2 is more controlled. It's slower, there's more effort in it, and much more analytical. There are some biases, and these are super, super important. So I want you guys to put a star by the decision-making biases box. So you guys have this. So first we have our confirmation bias, and that's where you search only for information that supports your idea. You don't want anybody else's ideas to kind of get in your way. And then you have your hindsight bias, where you're just kind of like, oh, I knew that all along. Availability heuristic, you predict probability based on ease of recall. You have your base rate fallacy, and you ignore information about general principles, so you're just kind of like, that's not going to apply to me. And then representativeness heuristic, and it's where you kind of make judgments based on stereotypes. So example, you guys have seen, most of you have seen Mean Girls, where the jocks are just kind of like, just kind of sit there, get everything handed to them. Doesn't happen that way. Or you see them in movies, and they're popular in school, but then when they fast forward in 6 years, they're 50 pounds overweight flipping hamburgers. Does that happen to every single jock? No. Could it happen to anyone? Yes. And then we have our critical thinking, and this is just looking at how you think, evaluating, seeing if there's evidence, and you have to definitely be mindful and be very open-minded. You need to be accepting of other outside ideas. And then emotion and cognition. Your mood definitely influences the way you think. If you're a more positive person, you're going to be more creative. You're going to ignore information that's kind of stupid. You're going to be very original. You're even going to bring on more positive ideas, where if you're in a bad mood or a more negative mood, you're going to use more logic to solve problems. You're going to really be very analytical into stuff. And then we have our creative thinking. This is just where you brainstorm, you allow different ideas to come about. Sometimes if you're thinking creatively, you might let your mind look at different risk factors. And it can be really, I guess mind-blowing is the right word, for your brain just to kind of let it go where it wants to go. So this is all for Unit 5, Part 1. Hope you guys have a great evening. Bye.